Sixth aliyah. The Torah discusses the fourth and final type of chatat, that of a common person who sins. Also discussed is the karban oile v'yored, a vacillating sin offering, meaning going up and down, brought by an individual guilty of certain specific sins. For example, not testifying when he should, or testifying falsely. The vacillating sin offering depended on the financial position of the transgressor. A wealthy person brought a sheep or goat. A person of lesser means brought 2 birds. And a pauper brought a meal offering. There is a very interesting law that says that a person can in fact pledge the vacillating sin offering, the value of the vacillating sin offering of a different person. So here, it's vacillating based on the financial position of the person who needs to bring it. If, let's say, a rich person needs to bring the offering, he obviously brings the highest cost of the offering, the first category, sheep or goat. If it's a poor person, to the opposite extreme, he brings a meal offering. Fine. The person who needs to bring it is no longer obligated to bring it if someone else pledges the value of that offering in his place. And if everything lines up, there's no question. A rich person who needs to bring the offering is replaced by somebody who is also rich who pledges it. They're obviously bringing the rich offering. A poor person who is replaced by somebody who is also poor, they're all obviously bringing the poor offering. That makes sense. That's straightforward. But what if, and this is only a Jewish mind could ask this, let's say that a rich person needs to bring the offering and a pauper pledges it in his place. He has to bring the rich offering. And you might say, well, that makes sense because he's pledging to bring the value of the rich man's offering. But if the scenario is reversed, it's a poor person who really needs to bring the offering, but the person who pledges it, who wants to be in his place, is a rich person, based on the previous logic, you'd say that he should bring a poor person's offering because that's what he's replacing. But the law is that he brings a rich person's offering. So you basically can't win. Whether it's the original person or the replacing person, they have to bring a rich offering. Why is that? This is where the statement of our sages comes in and says that Kol Yisrael orevim ze lo ze. Every Jewish person is responsible one for the other. And therefore, we basically are one entity with different parts. A different wording of that same statement is Kol Yisrael orevim ze bo ze, with a bet instead of a lamed, which basically translates as every Jewish person is intertwined with each other. Not just responsible from a legal perspective or even a moral perspective, but a spiritual intertwining. And now it makes sense. As soon as it's the rich person who originally has to offer it, it has to be a rich offering. As soon as it's a rich person who wants to replace the guy who pledges it, they're one entity, and now a rich part of that entity is involved. A rich offering has to be brought. The seventh aliyah. This section concludes the laws of the karban oile v'yored, the vacillating sin offering. We then move on to the last sacrifice discussed in this week's Torah reading, the guilt offering, the asham sacrifice. 3 types of guilt sacrifices are discussed. An asham brought by one who inadvertently misappropriates temple property. An asham brought by one who falsely swears regarding money owed to another. In addition to bringing a sacrifice, these 2 individuals must repay the principal amount and pay a punitive fine equal to 1/4 of the principal. And C, an asham brought by a person who is uncertain whether he violated a Torah prohibition. If he's uncertain, maybe he didn't violate. Why do we assume that he violated and all of a sudden needs to bring an offering? But that's actually not the mechanism. We don't assume that he violated. We think of the scenario when a person would be uncertain if he violated or not. The only way that you can be uncertain of something important is if you're actually not considering it that important at all. I'm uncertain whether I ate today or not. Apparently eating isn't all that important, otherwise I'd know that I ate or I didn't. If a person is uncertain whether or not he violated a Torah prohibition, apparently Torah prohibitions aren't all that important to him, and therefore he's uncertain. In that kind of a scenario, he obviously needs atonement, and therefore he brings this offering.